Namaste, and thank you for your attendance today at Vichar Manthan London West Chapter. I think it's a very apt topic, and I'd like to thank the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center for hosting us here today and allowing Vichar Manthan to ask some questions. Vichar Manthan is a national voluntary organization. We have 7 chapters across the UK and are avidly growing. The idea behind Vichar Manthan is to help modern day Britain with some of the wisdom that we have from our Samaj and Parivar. If you think about the history of Bharat and the dharmic attitudes that we come from, we've got years of experience in social, political, economic, educational sectors. Today's a very special Vichar Manthan about the relevance of Swami Vivekananda. In 1893, Swami Vivekanand gave a talk at the Fullerton Hall in what's now known as the Art Institute of Chicago. Just a few months ago, myself and some members of the audience went to the World Hindu Congress, where we spoke about Swami Vivekanand and some of the teachings he implored. But some may argue that we are just using him as a brand nowadays. So today's Vichar Manthan is to do exactly that. Explore this idea that have we turned the dharmic attitudes and the way we look at Swamiji into just a brand ambassador? Or is there some truth? Is there some depth behind those teachings? And do we implore them in our daily lives today? With that, I would like to introduce our chairperson, who is Tusharji Shah, who is an entrepreneur, investor, and a thought leader in the UK healthcare and real estate sector. He has been a lifelong member of Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh and has had various roles for the organization. He has also been the Vice Chair of National Hindu Student Forum and has organized Dynamic Spirit Conferences and is currently the Saha Bodhik Pramukh, which is about knowledge development in the national arena. Tusharji also works in the UK Hindu community, bringing into reality positive differences. He shares an ideas and thoughts on entrepreneurship, personal and team development, and also healthcare through his various talks and books. He has a Master's in Business and Information Communication Technology and LLB in Law. And now welcome Tusharji to the stage to then take on and invite our expert witnesses. You will see on your chairs as well, you have a feedback form and a contact form. If you think of questions during the discussion, please write them down. And during the break, our ushers will collect them and we'll have a chance to ask our expert witnesses post-break. So please welcome Tusharji to the stage.
Swami Sarvastananda is the minister in charge of the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center in the UK. He's a graduate of mechanical engineer and following graduation joined the Ramakrishna mission in Rajkot. He worked very much in their publications and was an editor for 17 years of their Gujarat publication. He was also offered his services in times of disaster, helping and organizing responses to earthquakes, droughts, and various other social crises. He tours the world and shares his thoughts on spirituality, culture, leadership, personality development, and a wide range of topics inspired by Swamiji's message. Reading his biography, he has a wide range of experiences, but there are 2 things that I think really stand out. One, he was very instrumental in introducing the Swami Vivekanand Contributor Personality Development Program, which is a compulsory student program in the Gujarat Technological University, where 80,000 students and 500 colleges learn and practice and implement the teachings of Swami Vivekanand. He's also represented the Ramakrishna mission at the UNESCO conference on youth and their social impact and represents them on various other events around the world. So without delay, I'd like to ask Swamiji to begin the discussion. So to break you in easily, Swamiji, what would you say is your favorite quote from Swami Vivekananda?
One of my favorite quotes, which I just came across a few minutes ago, I was thinking of something else, so I'll just read it out. Teach yourselves, teach everyone our real nature, call upon the sleeping soul and see how it awakes. Power will come, glory will come, goodness will come, purity will come when this sleeping soul is roused to self-conscious activity. This quote he delivered in London, so I just thought of sharing it with you.
So Swamiji, Vivekananda had many, many quotes. So that quote, how is it relevant to society today?
You see, all along, if you see history, especially the Abrahamic religions, and compare it with the religions which had its birth in India, most of the religions have been theocentric or God-centric. There's nothing wrong in that. But India went a step ahead and created a religion which was human-centric. So I feel Swami Vivekananda was the first to point out amongst all our divinities, all the gods and the different religious paths, not only in India but outside India as well. He pointed out that it is the human soul which is at the center of all our worship. And if we cannot worship that God, that Godhood or that divinity in man, all our worship, whether it is in the temple, in churches, in mosques, will be futile. So I think this quote calls upon every soul and asks them to recognize this divine principle which is in every human being, irrespective of his caste, creed, religion, ethnicity, or maybe nationality. It crosses all borders. So our religion, Vedanta, for the first time, they declared this divinity of the soul in the Vedas. The Vedas or the Vedanta proclaimed this great truth, and this truth is compatible not only with other religions, but is also it bridges the gap between religion and science. All the modern knowledge which has been accumulated over centuries can perfectly fit in this wonderful scheme or wonderful definition which Swamiji has given.
So thank you for that. The challenge is every other religion will also make that statement, that they are a leader on thought and a good for humanity. How, in your view, is Swamiji's teachings relevant today with the human challenges that we face in society?
Yeah, we cannot deny that fact, because this truth you can find in all the different religions, though their focus was somewhere else. So whether you consider Christianity, where Jesus says the kingdom of God is within you, it points out to the same divine principle or the same divine theory which was preached in Vedanta. So if you find at the core of every religion, this element is there. But because Hinduism or maybe the Vedic religion is the oldest one, it had a better chance to expand or maybe be applied to all our different fields of life, fields of endeavor, which humankind, and the main thing is the importance or the practical side of Vedanta makes it relevant even in this age of science and technology, when science and technology has broken down the theocentric approach to religion, because then there is quarrel between your God and my God. But if you keep human being at the center of your religious endeavor, and if you consider the divine principle in him, the same divine principle is in every human being, irrespective of his caste, creed, religion. That focus, I am saying, was first discovered, because it was discovered historically, if you see, it was first discovered in the Indian subcontinent. And that's why Swami Vivekananda mentioned this in Chicago, that I welcome you all in the mother of all religions, just because of its, maybe historically it was the oldest. That has been confirmed now. But other religions have focused, all the great prophets, of course, have mentioned this and emphasized this central point of every religion, that there is divinity in every human being. All religions without any exception.
So following on from that, when one reads Swami Vivekanand's teachings, he's a very big advocate of karma yoga. What is karma yoga and how is that still relevant to today's society?
It's a wonderful question. I'll just give you a brief background why he gave so much importance to karma yoga. Perhaps he felt, especially for India, this was actually, he laid more emphasis on karma yoga to the Indian masses, not all over the world. In other places, he spoke about Raj Yoga, meditation. He spoke about Jnana Yoga, the methods of knowledge, the path of knowledge, and Bhakti Yoga also, the path of devotion, which is there in all other religions as well. But he emphasized Karma Yoga for one reason. He said there are basically 3 civilizations which have impacted the entire humanity. See, he was a student of history. So he made a wonderful generalization. He said 3 great races have contributed to entire humanity, and we cannot deny it. We are seeing the fruits of their contribution today in the world. The first, of course, I'm not going chronologically. He spoke of 3 great races which contributed, and whatever we are today, the modern world is the combination of these 3 great races. The first culture, he said, which contributed its thought was the Greek culture. Not the first historically, but the one of the 3. So Greek culture contributed a lot in arts, sciences, which we see technology and all its fruits which we see now. And he also said the Roman civilization gave the entire world the idea of politics and administration. So whatever systems of politics which we see, democracy, whether it's communism, even to a certain extent communism, and all the other the systems of political thought was a Roman contribution according to Swami Vivekananda. But he said the third civilization which has contributed a lot was the Indian or the Eastern civilization, which gave the world spirituality, the idea of the superiority of spirituality. Because he said what progress in civilization is nothing but a progressive reading of the spirit into matter. The West developed the material side of nature, and he says credit should be given to them, and the East developed the spiritual side of civilization. So he says a progressive reading of this spirit into matter is India's greatest contribution. And that's why he said, but at the same time he said there was so much of excess of spiritual thought and values that people neglected work in India, especially in the Indian subcontinent. And that's why socio-economically a nation which was having 25% of the world's GDP in the 16th century came to a mere, you may say there are other political reasons, the invasion by the Mughals and the British and so many other foreign powers, but that's not the only reason. Our people, the Indian civilization, at the cost of developing spirituality, they neglected materialism, which is necessary. According to Swamiji, you may find it strange. He was a spiritual giant, but at the same time, he said, we have neglected materialism, so a little bit of Karma Yoga, more emphasis should be given on Karma Yoga, and you try to apply these spiritual principles in your day-to-day life, in your business, in your teaching, in your education, in all the fields of life, and then you see how excellence is attained not only in on the material side of it, but also on the spiritual front. So that was his contribution.
So that's a very good perspective of his teachings. In your view, what is the reality of that implementation in today's society?
You see, reality, if you see country-wise or maybe nation-wise, you see all the progress made by countries such as India and China, which for centuries suffered a lot of socio-economic, regression. For various reasons, I'm not going into those reasons now. But if you see the impact it has created on the eastern side, China and India are coming up. If you see socio-economically, I'm not talking about religion. Whereas in the West, his contribution is, and he made a wonderful remark in a place which is just 5 miles away from here. It's known as Pinckney's Green. It's near Maidenhead. He said, this London, in those days, England was ruling practically the entire world, half of the world. So he said these spiritual ideas is what will save the European civilization. And you will be surprised to know he predicted the World War I and World War II. He was passing through Germany. He has passed through the entire Europe. And he said, I see the whole of Europe is sitting on a volcano, which is going to burst any day. This he said in 1900 when he traveled from Paris. He passed through all the states of Europe. You should read a wonderful book of his, Memoirs of an European Travel. So he said, if Europe has to be saved, if the Western civilization has to be saved, then it has to turn to Eastern spirituality. So, and Eastern people, on the other hand, he blamed the Indians and all the Eastern people that you neglected materialism. Some sort of toned down materialism is necessary. Otherwise, if you don't survive economically or politically, if you don't survive, then you can't hand over the wonderful treasures which India has developed over the ages to the other cultures. So he spoke two different things. So in the West, his preachings in the West, especially in London, because he believed that London was the center of the entire Western thought in those days. Of course, America became the center. But he said, if I put these Vedantic ideas in the heart of Western culture, which was London at that time, it will spread and it will change the civilization upside down, which
So that's a very good perspective. And if we look at modern society today, we do see the treasures of India being shared globally. We see yoga being practiced daily by millions and millions of people around the world. We see a new genre, a new movement of mindfulness or meditation, and we see vegetarianism and veganism. These are philosophies that have its foundations within India. However, and this is the risk, as the West take over these movements, is there a risk that the spiritual foundation is removed and therefore becomes non-relevant in, say, 50, 100 years' time?
It's a very good and pertinent question in today's context. Because after Swami Vivekananda, he was the first, you may say, spiritual ambassador. So in fact, it was Raj Yoga which he wrote or he gave to the West, was the first attempt in explaining to the West what this yoga was. But unfortunately, after him, there were so many gurus or leaders who emphasized the externals of Hindu religion or these yogas, especially the Raj Yoga, the meditation you're speaking of, the Hatha Yoga for improving health and all those things. They are very important, but they are not the kernel, they are not the central theme of yoga which Swami Vivekananda taught. So now the thing is, if we dilute it, and then of course it got diluted a lot, and so there's a lot of misunderstanding about what real yoga is. Is it merely yogasanas? In fact, Patanjali, the founder of yoga, on whose book he wrote that wonderful book Raj Yoga, is a commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras say asana and pranayama and all those things. The Hatha Yoga is they are just two preliminary steps to the real yoga, and people have forgotten that. So perhaps that's the reason why we have to go back to Swami Vivekananda. He is more relevant today because he has given us a total holistic view of what real yoga should be. Of course, he does not deny the importance of good health. In fact, he himself emphasized that a little bit of pranayama, breathing, regular breathing and all those things are necessary, but not beyond a certain point. If we emphasize the externals more than the main purpose of yoga, then yoga becomes very, we trivialize it.
So I think this will be a discussion that we can explore further during the question and answer session. Please, if you have any questions on what Swamiji said, please write it on your slip and hand it to one of the ushers, and we'll then ask those questions after the break. Swamiji, thank you very much, and we'll now request my second guest. So Srinivas has flown in just yesterday from India. He's wide awake and does not suffer from jet lag. But he's also a very inspiring person and is the founder and CEO and lead researcher of Illumine. This is an organization which uses the teachings of Swami Vivekananda to shape and practically implement the teachings of Swami Vivekananda in the corporate world. He has also used this knowledge to also bring it into schools and colleges, and has developed a series of books and workshops for children to understand the teachings of Swami Vivekananda and how they can practically implement those on a day-to-day basis. He works with many businesses, including companies such as Tata Consultancy and the State Bank of India, and we'll explore some of those learnings and during our question and answer session. But his work has impacted 3 to 4 million people within the corporate sector. Currently, he's writing a book titled Knowledge for Enablement, which is asking questions and guiding people on how to strengthen human beings so that they can become more resilient, responsive, and empowered to take on the challenges of the new world. In the UK, we have many challenges, such as Brexit, which we may explore. But let's ask you with the first question. So, Srinivas, what is your favorite quote from Swami Vivekananda?
Since you'd already warned me that you would ask this question, here's my answer. So, the quote that's my favorite is, education is not the amount of information that is put into your head and runs right there, undigested all your life. We must have life-building, man-making, character-making assimilation of ideas. If you have assimilated 5 ideas and made them your life and character, you have more education than anyone who has got by heart a whole library.
Fantastic. That's one of my favorite quotes as well. So, from your perspective, how is that relevant in today's society?
I think that spiritual teachers of the caliber or of the level of Swami Vivekananda, when they come, they spread or they scatter very, very big ideas across the globe. And they do it in a very short time. Swami Vivekananda was, entire period of ministry was only between 1893 and 1902. So they scatter big ideas, but it is left to us to take up each of those ideas and to assimilate them, to digest them, to transform them into meaningful wholes which can actually reshape civilization. To sit down and say that someone who has given us the base of the ideas, that it is his job to reshape our lives, I don't think that's the right way to approach this. I think the responsibility is 50-50. 50% is Swami Vivekananda to give us the ideas, 50% is ours to assimilate those ideas and to transform our lives and the lives of people around us.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask you, probably one of your important case studies was the state turnaround of the State Bank of India, the turnaround of that. Within 2 minutes, can you share with the audience the context of what you did, what the current situation, the situation with the State Bank of India, how you applied your models of management based on Swami Vivekananda's teaching, and what the end results were?
When we took up the State Bank of India challenge, the problem in simple terms was, we have with us, they had with them 200,000 employees who are public sector employees, who, when the chairman put it very nicely, he said that I cannot sack them, nor can I give them any incentives. And if they just get to work, I have to look after them. How do I get people like these to sit down and to help and to serve customers? In short, the Western models of carrot and stick won't work. I have to go beyond carrot and stick and do something. It is only when you reach the limits of carrot and stick that you realize that there is a third dimension, which is really the intrinsic desire in every person to manifest oneself, to serve, to expand oneself and include others. So the task that we had in front of us was to awaken this intrinsic desire, to answer the question, why do I work beyond the money? Why do I work beyond the sticks that I might have or the fear of losing a job? Is there some other reason why I work? And if I tag on to that and awaken that, get people to discover it, then apply it into the context of banking, apply it into the context of then you have a radical transformation. So that's what we did. It took us about 24 months to do it. And we did it in a series of interventions. And I'm not getting into the details because of the time. But it's interesting that 200,000 people across 14,000 branches went through a discovery exercise where they asked themselves, what kind of fruits do I get out of work? And everyone said that I get outer fruits. I get, economic value. I get, whatever I get. But we asked them that just remember the most important moments of your life and without fail. And this was a discovery exercise. Nobody was telling them this. Each group discovered that the most valuable moments of their life was when they got inner fruits. If we love our families, it's because of our inner fruits, not because of the outer fruits that we get. If we look after our older people, our older generations, it's because of our inner. The whole of Indian civilization is built on inner fruits. And so it is awakening that inner fruits. Once they saw that, that was the beginning of the change. And of course, we then applied that into how do you transform that into human touch at the ground level, and how do you use it to reconnect to communities? How do you go back and connect it to people on the ground and use it? But that's, a long story.
Yeah. So that's very interesting, because while studying my master's, I came across a Western philosophy. You may have come across Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So the basic needs for a human are, he talks about 6, but the first one is food and shelter. The second one is human contact. The third is to feel valued or significance. And then the fourth one is spiritual contribution, going beyond your needs. Is this not another example of where actually our Swami Vivekanand's message has now been diluted by Western philosophy?
Yes, I agree with you, because it's what ends up happening is that they try to compromise between what they already know and what Swami Vivekananda was saying, because Swami Vivekananda's message was almost always radical. So it required a certain leap of faith to understand what he's saying. Let me answer that same question of Maslow's need hierarchy with another example. You have been to India, if you see the petrol pumps there and you see the petrol pump attendants there, they are the lowest level of the social hierarchy. If I want that person to, for example, serve a customer or to try to connect to that person, if I try to connect it by giving him a little more money, he says, I don't need that money because anyway I'm stealing petrol. He comes from that angle. But the same people, when we worked with them and said, no, your real strength lies in your identity. And that your identity is one of saying that I have with me Atma Balam, which is an Indian idea. Buddhi Balam second and Bahu Balam third, which is physical strength, mental strength and spiritual and inner strength that is there. Indians understand it. That uneducated person also understands it. But when you awaken that idea, then they shift their whole thinking and start by saying, what is it that I am going to do here? And of course, everybody wants money, but the starting point can't be money. The starting point is yourself. And that's my point.
Fantastic. So, obviously, Swami Vivekananda has influenced yourself in terms of your approach to business, management development, personal development. If it's such a powerful message and still relevant today, why is it not being taught across MBA schools across the world?
I think that there's a job to be done. And I think that job is to be done by people like you, people like all of us, that we need to take it up in every field. And we need to take up even one quote or take up two quotes and then translate it. Because it is true. But what's interesting is that it has been my observation that what is it that we will do if we implement Swami Vivekananda's? I think that we will accelerate the evolution of the world. We will accelerate where the people have to go to finally. If companies are disconnected with communities, if they are going to be hyper-transactional with the environment, sooner or later there is going to be a backlash from mankind. If you are going to have organizations, the same automation is going to come in, wipe out millions of jobs, but along with it, therefore there will be a need to ask where is the meaning and how am I going to expand and upgrade roles in society. So there are two ways of reaching the same answer. You can reach it either through hard experience and getting beaten up by the circumstances and by how society unfolds, or you can get through it the faster way, which is by simply standing on the shoulders, if I may to say so, of great seers like Swami Vivekananda, learning from it and applying those principles ahead of time and giving yourself that space to deal with it positively.
I'm going to explore this. So I do agree that when people stand and learn from people who have gone through that journey, they can accelerate their development faster. When we look in the global companies, there are many Indian Hindu CEOs. We see that in Google, Microsoft, and recently Pepsi. One thing I do not find is that these CEOs come forward with their Hindu or they don't share their philosophy in a wide way. And I give an example. In the UK, one of the largest toy retailers, Entertainer, is run by a Christian. Whilst most companies open up on a Sunday, out of principle, he keeps his stores closed on a Sunday, which could impact 15%, if not more, of his turnover. we do not see such stances coming from, or can you share where people have done this outside of India?
Okay. I think that there are two perspectives on this. Let me quickly walk through both the perspectives. One perspective on the whole thing is to look at the point that just because you have a Hindu body doesn't mean you have a Hindu mind. Let's be clear about it. Because your mind might be completely shaped by a discourse of more than 300 to 500 years. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So let's not therefore equate the two.
Yeah.
That's my first point of view. So therefore, when we are talking about saying that has someone brought an Hindu approach to business, is it whether he or she knows whether there is a Hindu approach, whether there is a point of view there. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I think that if the more global the company, the more Swami Vivekananda's teachings are relevant. Now that's a strange statement I'm making, but I don't think there was anyone who stood. You see, it starts with what Swamiji was also saying, that if you begin with the idea that inside each person lies an infinite potential, inside each person lies an infinite freedom, and infinite capacity to be anything I wish to be, then that's a universal idea that transcends East and West. And if I take a global corporation, I think that a CEO of an organization, if he does not have that perspective, then he is going to be limited by either a Western or by an Indian perspective. He is not going to be truly global in his mind in that sense. So I think that there is there's a necessity to approach things from that point of view. What does that mean when I say that people have infinite potential? It means an incredible amount of affirmation. It means transcending boundaries. It means transcending hierarchies. It means not getting locked into gender and other kind of hierarchies which have historically come, and breaking free and fresh and looking at things very freshly and starting inside out and looking at the world and saying, what do I see freshly in a flat world? And that's really what is needed to be global, I think, in the next 20 or 30 years.
And I understand that perspective, but is there not the risk that as our next generation move up the corporate ladder, get to these more senior positions, they do not have the shraddha, the confidence, the strength to assert their Hindu values, that they become more westernized or global minded rather than what helped them get to that position?
I think you have a very important point there. Because essentially one thing that I have found is that the essential approach to knowledge in the Indian tradition is slightly different from what I find, which is at least propounded theoretically in the West, which is that Indians approach things from what is called positive or from shraddha, which is from a positive faith in an idea. So if I approach the same Swami Vivekananda from a positive faith, if I approach the ideas in our Upanishads from a positive faith, then I'm able to dive deeper and unfold and see its full value. But if I come at it from a mindlessly critical viewpoint, which says that you prove everything in terms of material sensory kind of responses, or you just say that how does it match, some data that I see on the ground, then I'm having a totally different problem. So how have we solved it? But we must solve it, you see, because our children, our next generations are going to be born up in Western traditions. They are born up in various kinds of traditions. How do we help them transcend this dichotomy between this positive engagement and this other, critical kind of view? One of the things that we've done, I think I was mentioning to you that we are running, for example, a values program, which is now running in more than 5,000 schools. We have collaborated with the Ramakrishna Mission in Delhi. Every Kendriya Vidyalaya school in India, every central school in India, for example, runs it. And in this program, it's a 3-year program, standard 7th, 8th, 9th, 3 years that we've done it. And there are 16 sessions in each year. The point about this is that we are saying that you have to connect these ideas into how you're going to respond to life. So what's your data? What's your evidence? Your evidence must be, can I respond better to life? Can I handle life better? Can I deal with circumstances in a better way? If I can do it, then it's useful to me. And if I can't, and it's going to weaken me, and if it's going to lead me in a way that's not possible, then it's not going to weaken me.
So thank you very much for your time. It's been there's some very great insights there, and I'm sure during the question and answer session we'll get the opportunity to answer more, look at your perspective as well. So please fill out the slips if you have any further questions. So the final expert witness is Drishti May. Can I invite you to the stage? Drishti is currently the national president of the National Hindu Students Forum. The forum has over 10,000 members and is the largest Hindu student movement outside of Bharat. She is active in promoting that across our universities, as well as with external organizations and in the local community. She is a graduate of chemistry and from the University of York and is currently on the Unilever Future Leaders Program. She works in the technology sector and has recently also, and we'll ask her to share her experiences, attended the World Hindu Conference in Chicago. So Drishti, could you let me know what your favorite quote of Swami Vivekananda is?
All the powers in the universe are already ours. It is we who have put our hand in front of our eyes and cry that it is dark.
And how is that relevant to the youth of today?
A bit more poignant. So we, within NHSF, or we as Hindus generally, when we greet one another, we start off with namaste. We put our hands in front of us, and we recognize the potential divinity within us and the potential divinity of the individual standing in front of us. And I'd like to echo what Swamiji said and what Srinivasji said, in the sense of there is infinite potential that is waiting to be manifested. Every time we say namaste, we acknowledge this. Subconsciously, maybe consciously, we acknowledge this. But today, we live in an era, an age, where we are all obsessed with being perfect, with keeping up with our peers, with how we appear on social media. We're seeing an epidemic where, suicide is rising at universities. Male suicide in particular is rising. So we're living in an age where we're obsessed with how we appear. We put on false pretenses in the social sphere because we have to keep up with one another, and we've lost touch with reality. And it's leading to a rise in mental health issues. We're talking about mental health a lot, which is where movements, where dhyan has been repackaged as mindfulness, is coming about, because we need mental help. But at the same time, we're recognizing our potential divinity. And so what we need to recognize, and I think what's profound about this quote and what really means so much for me, is here we have an individual who actually stated this quote and lived it. He recognized his potential and he looked to maximize it and bring it to the forefront. And I think that's something that we could all do with remembering today, especially in light of the times that we live in.
Fantastic. So I'm going to change the flow of this talk, and I'm going to do a bit of a qualitative research here. So as the chairperson of NHSF, and I'm going to ask the audience this question as well, how much of your members know and are aware of Swami Vivekananda? I know it's qualitative and I'm putting you on the spot, but can you give us an idea, because this will be reflective of the Hindu youth in the UK?
Sure. So I'll have to put a disclaimer out there in the sense of at our committee training day earlier this year, we actually had some of our workshops themed around Swami Vivekanand. So I'm hoping quite a few of them do know and took it back to their universities. I think if we were to look at the thousands that we reach annually, I'd say around half would probably have heard of Swami Vivekanand, particularly in light of the celebrations that took place across the UK. So we've had exhibitions that have toured across our universities, really talking about, the contribution of India to the West, but also of Swami Vivekanand's message. But also, he's hugely quotable. Right? So arise, awake is something, even though it comes from the Gita Upanishad, we often attribute it to Swami Vivekananda. So in terms of quotes, in terms of relevance, in terms of are we aware of this majestic figure, I'd say quite a few students are aware. But if we were to go further and say actually how many have gone away and done something further, I think the numbers would drop quite quickly.
I think that's coming on to the next question. And I think let's ask the audience this next question, because by being here, you're all aware of Swami Vivekananda. So that question, we got 100% there. So we're all very good. So by default, our parents are happy. So next question I ask here to the audience, and if we were to then bring this to the students, how many of us in the last 12 months have read a book of Swami Vivekananda? What would we say? 25, 30% of the audience? Yeah. So that's interesting. So would you think that's reflective of the student population? And therefore, my question is Swami Vivekananda just somebody as a brand that has quotable quotes, and actually is his message really being lived in society today?
That feels like more than one question, but very good questions. So would that statistic of 25% be reflective of the student population? So perhaps if we went of the half that were aware, I'd say maybe less than 25% in the last 12 months. Honestly, I don't know, but I think it would be quite low. However, should we be reading him? Absolutely. So I remember, if to give a personal example, I read What Religion Is in my first year of university, and I studied chemistry. And I remember reading this one section on reincarnation over and over and over again, and something just didn't sit right, because you grow up here in the UK and you hear these ideas of reincarnation and you think, how does that actually apply to life? Like, really? Is this mumbo jumbo? Is this real? Like, is this just religion? Or is this, how does it work up with science? And you put your skeptical hat on. And at the time, I was learning about the second law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. It can only be converted from one form to another. And then you go back to your school education, right? And you break down what we're made of. We've got a lot of carbon, we've got a lot of hydrogen, we've got a lot of nitrogen. When we die and we decompose, we're being recycled, right? Isn't that some form of reincarnation, right? At some level. We can talk about energy and we can talk about equating energy, but even on a physical form, we often don't look into our heritage, we don't look into our philosophy. But if we did, and I find that Swami Vivekananda does this so well, if we look into his lectures and some of his books, we'll actually realize that he builds a bridge, and he is such a good figure in articulating our dharma, our history, our philosophy in a way that is digestible and palatable even today. Because what we struggle with, and I think you asked a question earlier about how do we apply things in the business sphere and how do we live our values. I think half of it is we can't reconcile our values because we've not found the language for it. And here we have somebody who has given us the language, and all we have to do is look. So I think he is relevant as an individual, and if we look at his life, what he achieved in 9 years of active service is amazing. So hugely, hugely relevant, and we all just have to look and read.
So thank you. So when one reads Swami Vivekananda's books and teachings, he has a vast range of knowledge. But one of the things that he always touches upon and comes into the philosophy of karma yoga is the practical challenges in society. When we look talking about the poor, people being oppressed, corporate greed, etc. Swami Vivekananda came back onto the earth today, reincarnated, and he saw the state of India and the state of the world, of Hindus around the world. Would he feel his message has really made a positive impact to society, or is it again just a vocal message which we like to talk about and haven't really implemented in our day-to-day life?
Okay. Again, so I can only speak from my perspective in terms of what I see. And, I think we're in that phase, we're in that space where there is a Jagruti, where we have ideas that are manifesting into action. So when we talk about karma, it's like, can we take the intellectual, can we take the ideas and allow them to manifest? And speaking solely from the student sphere, we have great initiatives that have come from so many directions but manifest in the form of Seva Day, where we have hundreds, if not thousands of students coming together to partake in local community centres, in their local, in the old people's homes, in care homes, in hospitals, on farms, in so many different areas, and actually pay that contribution forward. And not in the sense of this is my good deed for the day. in the sense of, you know what, this is something I want to live by. How do I go from hours of service, hours of seva, to a sevak mindset? That journey, that trajectory is definitely happening. We not only have Seva Day, but at NHSF we also have Seva Week, which is coming up next year, where we have a whole week where we are exploring the different forms of Seva. So not just what can I do for my community, it's what can I do for Bhumi Mata, what can I do for the environment, what can I do for my mental health, what can I do for my spiritual practice. So we look at all forms of seva in terms of enhancing ourselves, enhancing the community, and enhancing our ability to serve better every single day. So to answer your question a bit more fully, I think we should appreciate that there is a Jagruti, and it's a journey, it's a process. But we're definitely on a trajectory where it's going wider than just the Hindu Samaj, and it's actually something whereby we can accept it as a universal value. You know, even in the workplace, we're seeing things like we have to work with purpose. People, especially the younger generations, are no longer motivated by how much we're taking home. It's what am I contributing to? How do I have an impact? And so more and more people, particularly in the tech industry, are moving towards startups because you feel that sense of connectedness. So contribution and seva are manifesting, I think, in lots of different spheres.
Fantastic. So you talk about Jagruti. You recently went to Chicago to the World Hindu Conference. In 1997, which was a long time ago now, I went to Washington to where we had a similar conference celebrating Swami Vivekanand's 100 years. Does it not feel that we're always waking up and that we need to get out of bed and start doing some work across, and Swami Vivekanand's message isn't strong enough to really get us moving forward? What is your view? And I know it's a bit of a controversial one, but you know, we saw today that 30 people have just read his book in the last 12 months. Is he really a brand ambassador, or is he really a force of good?
So first of all, having 2,500 delegates all over the world gathered together to discuss not just ideas, but actually how we can enhance our work over the world, that is more than Jagruti. That is active service, right? There's always more we can do. Absolutely. That's why we're here. That's why we do what we do. That's why we talk to so many people. We're always looking to explore and enhance. So absolutely, you know, on both fronts. But the fact that we can gather together, yes, you know, we all reference Swami Vivekanand in our talks, in our workshops. And there's always more that we could do. But the fact that we are coming together, not in the start of our work, but very much on a journey. So for me personally, to be able to meet our counterparts that are across the US, New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, to be able to see how Hindu dharma is manifesting on campuses globally was hugely inspiring, but also allowed us to share ideas. How do we actually enhance our work? How do we share some of our resources? How do we take the student experience to the next level? So it definitely adds to that. In terms of has Swami Vivekanand become a brand ambassador? So I do actually resonate with this quite a lot. And I think that's when we come down to it, when we look at our own lives. If we were to just take that minute just to pause and say, actually, am I living it? I talk about it a lot, but am I living it? I think there's more we can do. You know, I'm sure we've got lots of professionals here in the room. You know, part of our job is networking. And we're very good at it. But do we apply those skills that we have in the workplace to our karya for the samaj? Like, you know, what I find really relevant and hugely inspiring about Swami Vivekanand is he wasn't invited to Chicago, right? He got himself there on that stage to say, we need to have a unified voice, a unified take on what Hindu dharma is. There were representatives of, you know, we split things up to say, oh, we'll have a Jain monk, we'll have this monk, we'll have this representative. But there was no unified voice on Hindu dharma. And he recognized that. And it wasn't just that he was like, I'm going to go to Chicago and I'm going to get myself in there. He networked. You know, through his father, through his late father, he had connections with the Freemasons. We don't often talk about it. But he used that network to get himself access to this conference. And that's something that we can all do. We can use our professional networks. We can use access to the resources that we have to create something better. And I think that's the second stage where we're not quite at right now. that there's a future where we could have a fund developed, dedicated to unlocking potential of young people. If we could have a future where we can have people going on scholarships to study Sanskrit, to study Hindu history, we'd have people writing theses and contributing to the intellectual and academic world, to the world of journalism, and we'll be changing narratives slowly. We're not quite there yet, and I think that's the second stage that is yet to unfold.
Thank you very much for your perspectives. It was very insightful, and seeing the youth's perspective on Swami Vivekananda. We're now going to be coming to the break. And again, I request if you have any questions to write it on the piece of paper and give it to the usher. As I've asked all the expert witnesses what their favourite quote is, I'm going to leave you with my favourite quote. And actually 1997 was a journey for me because it introduced me to Swami Vivekananda. And one of my favourite quotes, which has always stayed with me, is simply this one, which will help you maybe answer some questions. Just like water flows through the river, knowledge flows through the mind. But capture it, and something as powerful as electricity can be created.
I'll hand back over to Tusharji now to conduct the question and answer session. We've had many questions submitted online on Facebook as we're streaming online, so thank you to the dozens of people tuned in, and again thank you to everyone here. I'll be here to answer your questions at the end of the session, but for now we'll go back over to our expert witnesses and our chair.
But which book would you recommend has had an impact on your life from Swami Vivekananda?
I think it must be the complete works.
The book which is unique according to me is the book Raj Yoga. I believe that every one of you, because that's the most original contribution of Swami Vivekananda to the entire world, especially the Western world, the concept of yoga which he has clarified. So I think Raj Yoga inspired me, and definitely every one of you should read this book.
I think I've already given this answer away, but it's What Religion Is. So I've not read all of them, but What Religion Is definitely had a profound effect on me in shifting the way I think.
Thank you very much. So this is a question to Drishti and to Srinivas. Can you explain what NHSF is doing in initiatives in the UK within schools to spread the teachings of our culture? And then Srinivas, following on from that, could you elaborate on the values programs that you have run in the schools in India, and could they be brought to the UK, and if so, how?
So great question. So something that we did used to do, but now we focus very much in terms of the university sphere. But because we recognize actually there's more that we could always do, and we're always looking to push further, we expand beyond the resources that we put on the Teachers Forum website. So there is a website where teachers can come and collect resources. So we have lots of different worksheets and activities and presentations on there already, which have been viewed and downloaded by teachers quite extensively. So whilst continuing to add to that, what we also have are social media initiatives. So last year we started an initiative called Sanskrit Word of the Month, where we take simple words such as Bhagwan, Moksh, Dharma, and we break these down to look at what they mean, what's contained within them, but also provide a far more authentic narrative for these words in the public sphere. And they can be consumed by everyone. So we actually have them being viewed all across the world. So whilst we can't penetrate into schools maybe directly from a national perspective, we do that. Locally, we're partnering with individuals that already go into schools, and we're looking to encourage our students to go into school assemblies, because we do have a challenge on our hands where we have to recorrect or rebalance the narrative that exists within schools. The way Hindu dharma is taught today is not as reflective of what we experience as Hindus here in the UK or across the world. So that is something that we look to encourage as well.
So when we set out to design this program, this values program, just as a, our first basic point was that values are usually treated as do's and don'ts. So they're treated as something that constrain people and feel that it kind of prevents us from living all that we want to live. So we turned this around and said that values is all about freedom. And it's about freedom to be what you can be and what you want to be. Once you look at it, that's the first shift. The second shift is that values are usually told. So you're expected to, so it's in fact in a sense a symbol of authority, or it's a effect of authority in the minds of young people. Here we said that values have to be discovered, which means that you must discuss it, you must arrive at it, and you must see how to apply it into your life. The third thing is that these values have to be applied into the context of the challenges which children face. Because children face a whole set of challenges of their own. They're facing bullies, they're facing troubles at school, they're facing troubles with their studies, they're facing all kinds of troubles. Unless they can see how all this is going to strengthen them and use them, and they are able to use these values so that they're able to respond better into their lives and therefore handle their own existence better, that's when they start adopting values in a totally different way, because they can see its palpable and real value. So these were the principles that we used. So this was then converted into a program, and essentially it begins, the whole program begins with the idea that there is infinite potential in you, but we said now you've got to land that. It's nice to say that you have infinite potential, so how do you land it? So you have to talk in terms of the physical possibilities that you can do in the world, what you can do, explore the world, go to places, music, express yourself in 100 different ways. And then you have your knowledge possibilities, how you can actually expand the limits of your mind and the intellect which you are there. And then you get down even deeper into your character possibilities. Because what can you be? How extraordinarily heroic you can be. How you can think in terms of harmony. How you can think in terms of bringing people together. Universality. So all these are also possibilities. So this is what we took as the framework for the program. Now it's applied into standard 7th, 8th, 9th in the Indian schooling, and it's been converted with specific examples. So everything finally lands down into situations, responses. How are you going to act? How are we going to do things differently? How are we going to behave or think about the problem and make choices which are better? Once you applied that, we did it for standard 7th, 8th, 9th, 16 hours every year. And that's now scaled. So we had trained teachers. We've collaborated with the Ramakrishna Mission in Delhi, and it's now gone to 16,000 teachers across India. It's now part of the official CBSE syllabus, the Central Board of Secondary Education, and more than about 800,000 students get it annually across 5,000 schools.
So Srinivas, adding on to that, how can that be implemented in the UK?
Oh, that's what we have to do, is to look at the 3 building blocks. The core principles are the same. The messages are the same, but the context is different. So one of the things that has to be done is that what are the challenges which children in UK face? We need to apply these values into their challenges, into their challenges within their family and outside. Number one. And number two, we need to give them examples and situations that allow them to be able to respond differently. Give it in the language they understand, in the jargon they understand, in the terminologies that make sense to them. The visual pictures have to be those which they understand, because everything must then be contexted. And once you do that, then they are able to take the same universal values, but through the filter of their own experiences.
Is yoga and meditation part of that?
So normally we've got a list of questions here, so I'll let, if you can answer it in 10 seconds, I'll allow that.
No. Not yet, because
okay. So I'm going to bring something from the social media that's come through. One of the things that Swamiji said was women are like divinity. But in modern day society, we see such gender inequality. One of the things in the corporate world is women are paid less than men. Iceland has made it a law that men and women should be paid the same. Swamiji, what is your take on this?
This is one of the most important missions Swamiji had. Many of you are perhaps not aware that when Swami Vivekananda went to America, his target was not to participate in the Parliament of Religions. I can show it he has mentioned it in a letter. His primary concern was to educate women, because he believed that was, in those days, it was Indian women he was concerned about. He said hardly 2% of Indian women had access to primary education. So he said a nation, if it neglects its women at such a huge scale, it can never progress. So his main purpose of coming to America was to collect money for women's education, which he did through the medium of Nivedita so nicely, started the first school for girls, and that was the reason why Nivedita left everything and joined his mission. And the second thing I can tell you that it had a tremendous impact. I'll give you a very small example very quickly. There's a lady known as, very few people know this, that the biggest women's empowerment organization of all places is in India. It had its birth in India. There was one small girl, 13-year-old, Anusuya Sarabhai was the aunt of Vikram Sarabhai, who started the Indian Space Research Organization and many IIM Ahmedabad and all. So this girl at the age of 13, can you imagine, she was in school. She was married off as they did, child marriage was there. And she decided that she should empower herself. She wanted to get educated, which was denied to her because her husband had passed class 4. So she left the house and then with the help of her brother came to London School of Economics. She studied in England because we didn't have good institutions in those days. Women had no access even to primary education, leave alone high school education and university education. So she came here and then went back to India and started one of the biggest trade unions for women. Now it is known as Self-Employed Women's Association. Self-employed, all illiterate women, they're so powerful, they have their own bank, and so much empowerment is happening. That is just because she, throughout her life, she read the Song of Sannyasin and the Gyan Yoga lectures, where Swamiji says there should not be any distinction between men and women because the soul is sexless. So this idea, though it was in India, it was not followed, and as a result of that, India suffered. And he did not want India to suffer, nor any other country. When I came to England, I was surprised. India is long ago, at least the government employees, I mean teachers and everybody gets equal salary. You cannot discriminate on the basis of gender. So India is a step ahead. Whereas here, I was surprised it's happening.
So Drishti, what are your experiences of this situation?
So there's always two perspectives. So I think I've been quite fortunate, and I think myself being here as having the custodianship of the largest Hindu student movement outside of Bharat is a testament to our Samaj, that we, on one level, do not discriminate. We trust our boys and our girls equally, and where we see potential, we want to nurture it. So I think that's amazing. That's something I've definitely experienced of our Samaj. When it comes to the wider world, I've definitely kept tallies in my professional life of how many times I'm the only woman in an IT discussion. So part of it, I think, is our culture as a whole. Part of it is, where are we being nurtured to go? So where do our parents set our aspirations, and what do we aspire for? Are we as women seeing an area that is completely dominated by men and being like, yeah, I'm going to go there and I'm going to change the narrative and I'm going to add my perspective? Or are we saying, oh, you know what, maybe that's a bit too difficult for me. Maybe I should go somewhere where there are more women. So I think there's a question for us, and there's a question for our parents. What are we nurturing in the next generation? Are we preparing for the next Swami Vivekanand? Or are we actually just saying we want to stick to the status quo?
Fantastic. So Srinivas, this is a question for you. How easy or difficult is it to explain Nishkam, Karma Yoga in corporate sector?
Okay. First of all, I don't explain Nishkam Karma Yoga because that's really not what the corporate sector is about. What we do explain to them is something called enlightened self-interest. I think that Swami Vivekananda was very clear. He says you keep strict accounts. He didn't say that you have to, just give away things. But we don't have to operate with narrow self-interest. We don't have to operate with the idea that you have to compete with others. I think that these paradigms can be changed. So if you operate with enlightened self-interest, then that itself is a pathway that prepares you for a state where you can be Nishkam in the true sense of the word. So I think that for most people like us, I think that to operate in that state of enlightened self-interest has real effects. One example which I will give you is a very simple example, and in an oil company, for example, these people, they and it's one of India's largest oil companies. They are, when they looked at the communities around them of petrol pump, truck drivers, etc. We suggested to the petrol pump attendant, to the dealers, that why don't you do something for these people? Why don't you step out and actually give them some kind of health camps and etc. They said, we are an oil company, we are not supposed to do all this. This is the work for NGOs. We said, no, it's not the work for NGOs. It's part of your work, and let's try it out. We experimented with it with a few pilots, and the impact was huge. They had increases of sales that went up between 20 to 40% in oil. How can it happen? Simple, because when you do something, when you step out and engage with the community re-engages with you as a company. So it's enlightened self-interest, helps the company, helps the community. That's the thinking.
Thank you. So God is one. Soul, the soul belongs to God. Soul has no nationality. So why are we saying soul has Indian origin? Does God need religion to survive? Swamiji.
I never said soul had Indian origin. Everybody, in fact, so when Swamiji says each soul is potentially divine, he didn't say Indian soul is potentially divine. Everybody is potentially divine, and if we recognize that truth, irrespective of the religion to which we belong to or the nationality, ethnicity, the divinity of humankind is a central message of Swamiji. So I don't think there's a Hindu soul or a Muslim soul or a Christian soul. At least Hindus don't believe in it. I don't know if people misinterpret religion, then these chances are there. And this misinterpretation can happen in any religion. But we are not talking of them. We are talking of the real core of religion.
So Swamiji had a message to the youth of India. And one of the questions from the audience is, what can be done to infuse pride in identifying as Hindus? What can we do to infuse pride in identifying ourselves as Hindus for the youth? So I'm going to ask each of you 30 seconds from your perspective, and then we'll conclude.
So this is something that I think we're actively working towards. I've asked loads of students across the last couple of years how they describe themselves, and a lot of the time we have to justify why we're Hindu. So we say, I'm Hindu, but I'm more spiritual than religious. I'm Hindu, but I don't do this. I'm Hindu, XYZ. And can we arrive at that point where we can say, I'm Hindu, full stop, is something that we're working towards. The way we want to actually get or arrive at the point of owning our identity is threefold. One, can we identify and, educate ourselves on our history? We need to know where we've come from as a people, what we've been through. Two, can we identify, our roots in terms of language? Why are we reading so many translations where we have maybe not the most accurate translations when it comes to words like Atma, Dharma, right? Can we actually go back to Sanskrit and educate ourselves? So look into that. And third is owning our heritage. So we have loads of yoga societies, we have meditation societies. Where is the philosophy with the practice? Can we own that and bring that forward on our university campuses?
Swamiji, in one of his most famous quotes, I can say, we spoke about a true Hindu. So there he says that a Hindu can never be unselfish. He had three parameters to define a true Hindu. One was that religion or true religion or spirituality, he defined religion as spirituality, makes you unselfish. Unselfishness is the test of religion, that's what he said. The second thing, it makes you strong, physically, mentally and spiritually. If it doesn't make, then something is wrong with that religion. If it makes you weak in any aspect of life, physically, mentally, spiritually or morally. And the third thing he said, any religion, a true Hindu is always, he said that's the greatness of Hinduism, that he is always called as a mild Hindu, a peaceful Hindu. So the contribution which a true Hindu has made to the world is peace. And that's our unique contribution. No other religion, as far as I know, and Swami Vivekananda believed that has contributed so much to world peace, harmony, and this unity in diversity, trying to see the unity amongst diversity, accepting diversity as it is. That is what leads to true peace and harmony in the world. Diversity, we cannot make everything uniform. That's why he said that's the true nature or the true identity of a Hindu. So if we live up to that, I think we can call ourselves true Hindus.
I think that Hindus must have the courage to be original. I think we are most of the time trying to frame our language, our ideas, our thoughts in another frame. So I think that if we learn to take these ideas that we have, whether it's from Swami Vivekananda and even what we have from 5,000 years, and we are able to apply it in an original way in our context, I think that we have the opportunity to reinvent pretty much the way the world is run. And I think that's an opportunity that we would miss out if we spend the rest of our lives merely trying to fit in instead of trying to create something new.
Okay, so that's the end of questions and answers. There's plenty more, but unfortunately we run out of time. So this is really a big topic. So in conclusion now, if you could summarize, in the 21st century, have we reduced Swami Vivekananda to a brand ambassador? And give your final thoughts to the audience.
Well, in my life, no. Because in my life, I've spent 20 years and I've been watching that the deeper you go into Swami Vivekananda, you find that he really created and set, I think, in a sense, the framework or the ideas with which really a new world can be constructed. And I'm not saying this out of some mere jingoism. I'm saying this because we're working with corporations, we're working with people. And we are realizing that at every stage, it is these ideas that are giving us the ability to find new answers to the problems. I think that in several spheres, we are getting stuck into the same rut, into the same cycle of the same set of responses, like carrot and stick in management as an example that I gave. And it is these ideas that can actually help us break free and create a new paradigm. And I think that's really what we should be looking at.
I feel that even though there is a tendency for most of us to reduce him to a mere brand ambassador, those who are true lovers of humanity, wherever they are, in any part of the world, if they read Swami Vivekananda and try to transform themselves in the light of his teaching, that is more important. To be and then to make. We are in a hurry to try to understand and make other people understand. But it's a great struggle to try to live up to Swami Vivekananda's ideals, and though it is not impossible, as Srinivas said, and every effort, every moment of our life, he told this to Mary Hale, one of his American disciples. He said, she asked, what is the mission of your life? She said, the mission of my life, to put in a very few words, 2 sentences, is to how to manifest this divinity within me and see that it is manifest in every moment of mine in life. If I am able to do that, then I have truly lived Swami Vivekananda's ideals, and I think it is not an impossible task. He has made things, religion, so simple, so it is so tangible for everybody, even a small child, even an illiterate person. I feel we are on the way. Only thing is, it requires a bit of effort on our part.
So to answer the question simply, I would say yes. I think we have reduced Swami Vivekanand to a brand ambassador, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And I think from the perspective of the youth, I think what our challenge is that we have to see past the saffron robes. Every single time we see someone clothed in that, we sort of think we have prejudices, we have stereotypes associated with it. And we think as the youth, oh, you know what, we're full of passion, we're full of fire, we want to do action, we don't want to sit and meditate. That is a connotation that emerges, whether that's unconscious or unconscious. But all one has to do is actually look at the life of Swami Vivekananda, and we'll realize that actually he's so relatable. Today we have a rising trend in bodybuilding, or, looking good and going to the gym. Well, Swami Vivekananda looked after his body as well. He was really well read, he was well travelled, he was so hugely knowledgeable, but then moved from that realm to the realm of experience. And just look at all of our Instagram and social media pages. We're great at collecting collecting experiences as well. So actually, if we look at the depth of the man, there is so much to be unlocked. And I think what unifies, or what really gives way to Swami Vivekanand being a character whereby he could unlock his potential, which we're all trying to do in one way or shape or form, is that he had a sense of mission. He had a very clear mission and he lived by it. And I think that if we can look within ourselves and cultivate that sense of mission, we would be closer, and we would be closer in that journey of realizing our own potential and not reducing Swami Vivekanand to a mere brand ambassador.
Fantastic. So that brings a conclusion to this evening's Vichar Manthan. It's been very thought-provoking. There's been some great insights from both the corporate, spiritual and the youth perspective.
I'd like to thank the panel for gracing us and allowing us to actually ask questions, some of which are hard-hitting, sometimes controversial. That's the very nature of Vichar Manthan, is to bring about a perhaps modern British issue or something happening within our own societies and teasing it, prodding it, checking that actually what's the temperature here, what's going on. And with the Vedanta that we have, with the knowledge that we have and is waiting to be unlocked, we should try to apply that forward. So again, thank you to the panel, thank you to our chair, and thank you to the Ramakrishna Vedanta Center for hosting us here today. Thank you to the panel again.